Okay, so episode 9. There are 5 players left: Kat, Alan, Joe, Nick, and David. So they all basically explained what they kind of felt and how it was to have gotten this far. So straight away, we'll start with Nick. He said it's been an overwhelming experience, especially when he thought he helped Celia at the beginning, thinking he was going to have put a target on his back. You have to speak up because it's the last day. And he said that Kat is definitely a traitor. I've come so far and I'd love to win this. Kat said it felt amazing to be in the final. She surprised herself that she could be such a good traitor all the way through. She's growing confidence in herself every day. She explained that she struggles with socialising and it's good exposure therapy, being around so many people, making good friends. And she said her and Alan are doing so well together and then they're not going to throw each other under the bus. Alan explained, let's face it, I've worked hard. He said it started as a nervous wreck, sweating and, being stressed and red and stuff at the beginning. And he's throwing some really good friends under the bus. Rest in peace, Paloma. He thinks he's a better liar and a better traitor than he thought he was. He's a fighter. He's good at creating chaos. And he'll use his powers of persuasion and hopefully not mess it up. Joe said he never thought he'd make it past day 1. He's been on a bit of a bonkers journey, and initially he was intimidated by the other celebrities' names, wasn't sure how to behave around them. He kind of was the ringleader at the first traitor banishment. He started to change his behaviour and open up to the group a little bit more, explaining it's a lot more stressful than playing for England. He said that Kat and Alan are the traitors. Nick's the only one who's confident about being a faithful. He wants to win, but he has to work out how. And finally, David said it was amazing, and he was amazed that he felt he got this far in the game. He survived the test of chance against Mark. He also underestimated how difficult the game was, explaining that it was an amazing experience with some amazing people. He didn't realise he'd have so much fun, and that, outside of the game, they're all leaving the castle as one group of friends. Claudia explained that the one final mission was called I Lost My Train of Thought. Alan said that Kat's obviously got some heat from Nick last night, but they still have to make sure they stay strong. Nick explained that before they enter the final game, they have a banishment, and he feels he's going to vote for Kat. Joe explained that Kat and Alan are obviously going to vote for David, and they therefore potentially sacrifice David, or they vote to get rid of Kat. Either way, he said he wants to end the game with Nick, and Nick explained that he felt like David was more faithful than Alan. I think Joe also said here that he feels that he's more confident in Nick being a faithful than himself. So, yeah, he knows he's a faithful, but he's like, you know what, even though I'm a faithful, I know Nick is definitely a faithful. And the final mission was the Traitors Express. So Claudia explained that they needed to be fast. And this was basically the train station where we'd usually see all the initial contestants kind of arriving at the platform from all their different areas with their suitcases and the rest of it. So it was a very iconic set, but it was great that it was kind of like the final episode of the final, the final part of the show. Claudia explained that they obviously had to be fast and avoid all the explosives. And basically there was 3 carriages in an outside area in total. And what they had to do was work out these little clues and do these little mini games to get a key, and each key from each part of the train would open a chest. The chest would have £5,000 in. So obviously there's up for £20,000 worth of grabs to have for the prize pot at the end. So in carriage 1 was kind of like photos of all the murdered players, and there was little rips and little holes on the envelopes. And Alan was like, oh my goodness, there's rips on the envelopes. Like rip those things off. And it basically spelt a word, so the 5 letters spelt the word death, so they had to just put death into the code. They got their first key. In the second carriage was all the banished players, so all of the real voting cards that they used throughout those games, they had to count out how many votes were in that particular carriage, or I think how many votes were done of banishments throughout the series. I'm not sure if it was the real number or if it was just a handful of what was done, but the correct answer was 61. In carriage 3, they had to unchain the coffins, and again, in one of the coffins was the key. And in carriage 4, they had to scramble through the coal barrels to again find the final key. It was also quite funny as well because you could see Joe really, really struggling to try and, get this coal, and every so often Nick would accidentally drop the lid on his head. So he'd be like, oh, Nick, stop it. Oh, Nick, stop it. So yeah, that was quite entertaining. Nick explained that he needed to try and find where David's head was at. Joe explained that he was obviously going to chat to Kat and Alan to see what they were going to do. And Alan said that as long as Joe thinks that him and Kat are faithful, they can obviously get rid of David. So I think everyone kind of wanted to either get rid of David or get rid of Kat, and it was just about which one was going to happen first. David and Nick said that, those people that were voting for Jonathan Ross early on, was that part of a camouflage? Joe said that going for Alan would be a complete mess or a complete guess. Nick said he's going to vote for Kat, saying that he suspected her before. And David said that, he's thought about her as well. So I think at this point, Nick kind of was floating between Joe and David. He wasn't sure, he did trust Joe, obviously, but now he's having a chat with David. He's almost kind of doubting himself about the Joe situation. So I think at this point, he was kind of 50-50. He could have gone either way. And I think Nick was the difference in vote. Joe said to Alan and Kat that, he thought that they all knew what they were doing in terms of the next vote. And they're like, yeah, we're obviously going to, get David out of the game. Alan also said to Kat here that they were going to get rid of David first and then Nick, and then they were going to probably end the game. And then obviously the two of them would take the prize for the two of them, and then unfortunately Joe would be left with nothing. David explained that the only real hope is that Nick does what he said he would do and vote for Kat to get her out of the game. Kat explained she was nervous for the round table and that it's obviously going to be intense, but saying that Nick might vote for her again. Nick said that they got to get the traitors. He's got to hope and pray that he's right. Joe said if it goes the way that he wants it to go, he'll have to decide between David or Kat. And Alan said that there's been 2 traitors since the beginning that are still in the game, and he hates being this cocky, but he has to be very careful. Claudia explained that at the round table there was £87,500 to play for, with Alan starting off saying, we're a little family and I think it's really, really hard. And Nick said he thinks there's at least 2 traitors, with David saying there's definitely 2 traitors. Nick explained that, 1 minute he's terrified, then there's relief, and, he didn't really feel from Alan there was ever that relief that he survived. And it was kind of the same with Kat, that, it's like, I've survived another night. Alan said that, the reason that he didn't ever feel that way is because he was already counting who hadn't come back to breakfast. So he was kind of already being analytical, trying to work out, oh my goodness, this person hasn't come back to breakfast. So as much as he, tried to show that he cared about, surviving another night, one, didn't really matter to him because he was a traitor who knew he was coming back. But secondly, he was worried about everyone else. That's kind of a faithful thing. Oh, worry about everyone else, make sure everyone else is okay. And then Joe and Alan had a conversation, and Joe reminded Alan about the whole forgetting about the shield situation. So again, Alan kind of played this one down because Joe said, well, you've got a shield, so you're obviously not going to die tonight. And Alan was kind of confused, saying, oh yeah, I do have a shield. But then when Joe asked him the question at the round table, Alan said that Joe never questioned him about that. He just said, you've got a shield. So yeah, again, I think it's not necessarily even miscommunication. It's like other people not listening, or people not being able to remember their lies, or, not remembering the truth properly. David explained that Joe is obviously in a castle full of comedians, and he seems to have quite funny comedic style, and somebody like him who's difficult to read would be an amazing traitor. Mentioning names, building narratives, that's a good strategy if you're a traitor, to build momentum against individuals. And Joe said that, the traitors have kept him in the game because he's difficult to read, but as the game's got further and further on, he's felt more and more comfortable to come out of his shell. So that's probably why he's so much more snappier and loud and vocal, not because that's how he's wanted to play the game the whole time, but he's got confidence that he thinks he knows who the traitors are, that he's, got that little bit more confident. And Alan said that, he's kind of shown more of a softer side as they get closer to the money. Alan and Joe, someone had already started mentioning Mark's name before Claire had even left. Nick explained that both Kat and Lucy were really close, and it seems that having to be close to a faithful allows you to be shielded. And she actually, when she won her shield, she didn't tell the rest of the team. And, was it a double bluff? Did she not want to tell anyone because she didn't want people thinking that she was a traitor when actually she was a traitor, and, getting all complicated? And I think as a duo, David said that her and Jonathan would be a good duo of personalities to be traitors together. And then I think Joe basically said here that he's been quiet the whole way through the game, and he's been struggling as to when to put his thoughts into the round table. So, now there's only 6 of them, this is probably the best time to do it. So I'll be back with part 2 of episode 9's review, and we will almost be at the end of the reviews.